As promised, here is a discussion of the final essay for HST 456, the Vietnam War. And as you know, as we've moved through the course, we've tried to take great pains in making sure that all perspectives of this war are shown, right? And we're not just talking about on the elite level, but also on the lower levels of society as well, right? So that there's a better understanding of what this war truly was about for everyone involved, okay? So when you're getting ready to formulate what it is that you want to discuss in this final essay, note that we're talking about some very specific issues here in terms of what this war was about. It was about the fight for Vietnamese independence, and it was about the fight against international communism, obviously, right? So these are the two main issues that we've discussed pretty much over and over again. So what you're going to be doing in your essay is you're going to be writing your own narrative about this war and relate that narrative back to the fight for Vietnamese independence and the fight against international communism. So what you'll actually be doing, because what a historical narrative really is that's the collection of assertions or interpretations made by historians. That's what we call historiographical assertions or interpretations. What a narrative is it's the bundling of all of those interpretations into a story, into a narrative. So that's what you've been doing with this material, is really understanding what the historical narrative is, which illustrates to you what the major historiographical assertions are, okay? What you'll be doing in your essay is you're going to write your own narrative. You're going to place the historiographical assertions that you've learned, or even some of your own, into this, and you're going to try to help a novice better understand the war and better understand how historians view the importance of the war, okay? So that in a nutshell, what you're going to be doing in terms of your thesis is you're really going to make an argument for what you believe this war was about, right? Again, relating back to the issue of Vietnamese independence and international communism, but that's very generic, right? That's not extremely specific. So your thesis statement, your argument for this paper is really going to be about how you view this war, what you think the war was about, and illustrate in terms of how you prove that thesis, illustrate to a novice what the war really was about and why it's so important, okay? And you'll be illustrating that through historiographical assertions and evidence, right? And so in this particular essay, you're really going to be looking at why the Vietnamese people wanted independence. You're going to be looking at the justification of American political leaders as to why they were embroiled in this in this country. You're going to be talking about your own opinion about the most valid reason for these people's positions in this war, in this conflict. What you think really is the most valid reason for fighting. Was it the North Vietnamese and their desire for independence? Was it the United States in terms of trying to stave off international communism? Okay, so you're going to be looking at your own opinions here, and you do not have to pick those two opinions, right? You can have your own understanding of why there really was a valid reason for fighting this war. There are a plethora of things that you can talk about, and there are also some really unique and original ideas that you could come up with as well. What you're going to do is, after that, is you're going to really be looking at your own argument about whether or not there was a victor in the Vietnam War, and then you're going to also talk about the major consequences and repercussions of the war for everyone involved. So in terms of really creating this essay, again, you're going to be trying to illustrate to your reader what the narrative is of the Vietnam War, why the war is important, and helping them to understand the war. And the way you would help them to understand the war is by following through on these major points that I've set out. So I've given you somewhat of a structure here, right? You don't have to fully follow it. I would like for you to talk about all of these points, but you don't have to base your essay on, well, this is one section and this is one section and on, right? You can talk about whatever you want. You can structure it whatever way you want, but I would like for you to discuss this information that has the bullet points here, right? So I just want to make sure that you're including this because, again, as you can see with all of these things that I've listed here, you're talking about that wide range of perspectives, right? So it's your own narrative, and I'm trying to illustrate to you that maybe you might want to talk about these points too, okay? Because if you're creating a narrative about this war and you're not including an understanding of all of these points and you're not including historiographical assertions about all of these points, then you're kind of missing out on what that broader historiographical understanding is that historians have, right? So you're really not tapping fully into what the basic narrative is of this war, and therefore you can't really make your own assertions because you're not giving that basis or that foundation to your reader, okay? So that's kind of why I have that all of those listed there. In terms of your thesis, again, you really want to make sure, and you can move down here into the requirements section, and you see I have in bold, your essay must have a thesis statement, right? So what is a thesis? A lot of people think that a thesis is a statement of purpose, right? But a thesis isn't a statement of purpose. It's an actual argument that you're going to try and prove throughout your essay. So a statement of purpose is, in this paper, I am going to discuss, or in this paper, I illustrate such and such and so, right? A thesis statement is extremely specific. It's an actual argument, okay? So everybody's essay needs to have an actual argument, and that argument is obviously going to be about this war and how you view the narrative of the war and how you view the importance of the war in terms of history, right? Once you have hammered out that understanding and your main conclusions about this war, then you can set out to organize the paper and make sure that all of the points that you're discussing all lead back to that larger argument. Because if you're not presenting information that proves that argument, you're not going to have a successful essay, right? So make sure that you organize your essay in a way that every single thing that you say shores up the argument that you've presented. Something else that you need to do in terms of, shoring up your argument is making sure that you have evidence, right? So as we've moved through the course materials throughout the session, you'll recognize the fact that there's lots of stats and there are lots of major assertions that are being made, right? So all of those stats are evidence, right? All of the work that historians have done already in order to help us understand this war are what we call historiographical interpretations, right? That's evidence too. So as you are writing this paper, you're not just going to be using that evidence to illustrate to your reader how you're going to prove your thesis, but you're also presenting that evidence to your audience in order to illustrate to them what the major historiographical interpretations are and where they can find them. This is where the idea of citation comes in, right? We want to make sure that you're citing all of your work. Well, why? Well, obviously, statistics and things like that, we know that we should be citing them, right? Where did you get this from? Oh, I got this from the Carnow book. Oh, I got this from Carnow, page 104, right? But often people don't necessarily recognize that an assertion made or an interpretation made by a historian is also something that needs to be cited. So when a historian makes a particular, or say Carnow, a journalist, makes an assertion, you don't want to claim credit for that, right? And so when you're writing, if you don't cite it, you're actually claiming credit for it. And that's where the idea of plagiarism comes in, right? And plagiarism is that dirty word, and everybody gets really nervous about it, right? But it really is, stop thinking about it in terms of something where you're going to get in trouble if you don't do this right or that right, and start thinking about, oh, I need to give credit to this scholar. I need to give credit to this writer. That's why I'm going to cite this, okay? So as you're presenting the evidence that's going to back up your own assertion, you're going to be using the work of other historians, right? You're going to be using the work of somebody, say, like Stanley Carnow, a journalist. So you are going to, you might be citing some of the interviews from the documentary. You really want to make sure that not only what you're saying leads back to your thesis, but that your reader can find the information that you're talking about, and that your reader knows that you are attributing this information to someone else. And it's only fair to do that, right? You wouldn't want to make this essay and create this essay and make this very specific argument that nobody else has ever made before, and then have somebody else use your paper to make that argument, right? And then act as though it's their own. So that's what the issue of citation is, right? We're not just illustrating to the reader where we got information from. We're illustrating to the reader that, hey, this is somebody else's hard work and I'm going to cite it. And not only will you be able to go find it in the library now, you are going to be able to illustrate to people that you know that this particular historian said this and that you cannot claim credit for it, and they should not attribute credit to you, right? So that's why citations are really important. And I want you to note, and we have this further down here on the page, that citations are really a significant part of this particular assignment, right? So when you're writing, you want to make sure that you're citing all of the arguments, all of the evidence, all of the statistics that you're taking from the Karnow book, that you're taking from the primary sources. And even though I don't have it here, again, the interviews from the documentary, right? A lot of those interviews are extremely valuable as primary sources. Most of the information you're going to take from these sources will be paraphrases. They're not going to be quotes. You only want to use quotes when you know you're not going to be able to change someone's language and really present that information in your own words, right? So that's when you want to use quotes. Otherwise, you're doing paraphrases of material or you're doing large summaries of material, okay? When you do your citations, make sure you're doing them in MLA style or Chicago style. Chicago style would be footnotes. MLA style would be the name of the author, or the last name really of the author, a comma, and the actual page number or range of page numbers that you found something set in parentheses, okay? That's fine. Most historians use Chicago style, but I know many of you are not historians, so I'm totally fine with you using MLA. So put that in there. Say you got something from the Karnow book, you put Karnow, comma, 74, done, okay? Put the parentheses around it, done. If you're using outside sources, things that we didn't use in this particular class, I would like for you to have a works cited page, because if you don't, say you use somebody's book and it's Kennedy and you put Kennedy, comma, 85, I'm not going to know who Kennedy is. Not going to know what book you're using, right? So I not only want to know where you got the information from if you're using an outside source, I also want to make sure that it's a scholarly source and it's something you should be using. So that's when you're going to need a works cited. Otherwise, you can just simply use in-text citations and not have a works cited. If you're using stuff from outside of the course, you need not only the in-text citations, but you also need a works cited, okay? In terms of formatting here, make sure that you write at least 5 pages, a maximum of 8. Somewhere in between that's really going to be able to illustrate to me that you get the material, but that you are not rehashing material or you are not being redundant, okay? So I want to make sure that you're within the 5 to 8 page range. All paper should be Times New Roman. 12-point font, 1-inch margins, double spaced, not single spaced, okay? So that should take a load off of you that it's not single spaced. So 5 to 8 pages of double spaced material, okay? So if you have any questions, particularly about the issue of a thesis statement, if you have any questions about citations, if you have any questions about what it is that I want you to get out of this essay and to illustrate to your reader and to me, please send me an email. The earlier we hammer things out, the better, right? So if you're creating a thesis statement and you're like, I don't really know if this is a thesis statement, then you want to send it along to me and you want me to look at it, that's great. And I'll tell you, you're on the right track or you're not on the right track, okay? Don't feel embarrassed to send me something. Don't feel embarrassed to send me a fragmented outline of your work, just so you can kind of have me see it and I can let you know if you're on the right track, okay? So I hope you enjoy putting this together. I think this is one of the great things about being a historian, is putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and really make this your own and use those historiographical assertions and the evidence as I mentioned, but really make your own thesis and your own argument yours, make it unique, and really really just sort of run away with it in terms of the evidence that you have via your primary and your secondary sources, okay? If you need anything, let me know, and good luck with the paper. Take care.